The stars looked different now, Jake Morrison thought as he stared through the bridge windows of the starship New Dawn. 3 months ago, those same stars had been points of hope and wonder. Now they hid enemies that could steal your mind and leave your body walking around like an empty shell. The Zephyrians had come from the deep space beyond the outer rim, their crystal ships appearing without warning above human colonies. Jake watched his crew work at their stations. Lieutenant Amy Walsh checked the sensor readings while Sergeant Pete Johnson monitored communications from the colony below. They all knew what was happening down there on Haven's Rest. The same thing that had happened on New Geneva, Prometheus, Station, and 12 other worlds. The aliens would land, deploy their mind probe devices, and within hours every adult human would be under their control. The mind probes were small silver devices that looked almost beautiful, like jewelry made of living metal, but when the Zephyrians placed them against a person's forehead, something terrible happened. The device would glow with blue light and send thin tendrils into the brain. After that, the person was no longer themselves. Their eyes would turn the same blue color and they would obey the aliens without question. Jake had seen the footage from the other colonies. Humans walking in perfect lines, building strange machines, mining resources day and night without rest. They never spoke unless the aliens commanded it. They never smiled or cried or showed any emotion at all. They were alive but not living, Captain. Amy called from her station. We're getting reports from the surface. The Zephyrian ships have landed in 3 locations around the main settlement. Jake nodded grimly. They had tried to evacuate the colonists, but there wasn't enough time. The alien ships moved faster than anything humans had ever built. How many people are down there? About 8,000, Pete answered, his voice tight with worry. Mostly farming families and their children. The children were always the hardest part to think about. The aliens seemed to prefer adult minds for their control network, but they took children too when they found them. Jake had heard rumors that some children might be more resistant to the mind probes, but he had never seen proof of it. Down on Haven's Rest, 8-year-old Lucas Carter crouched in the grain silo with his sister Katie. They had been playing in the fields when the sky filled with crystal ships. Their parents had grabbed them and run toward the storage buildings, shouting for them to hide. Lucas could hear strange sounds coming from outside, footsteps that moved perfectly in time with each other, voices that spoke in flat, emotionless tones. Through a crack in the silo wall, he could see people from their town walking past. Mrs. Henderson from the bakery, Mr. Collins who fixed their farming machines, even their own neighbor Bob Clark. But something was wrong with all of them. They moved like robots and their eyes glowed blue in the dim light. Katie was 13 and understood more about what was happening. She held Lucas close and whispered, "We have to stay very quiet. The aliens are controlling everyone's minds." "Where are Mom and Dad?" Lucas asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Katie's eyes filled with tears. "I think they got them too." The sound of footsteps grew closer. Through the crack, Lucas could see figures approaching the grain silo. Some were human with glowing blue eyes, but others were definitely not human at all. The Zephyrians were tall and thin with skin that looked like colored glass. They moved gracefully, but there was something cold about them that made Lucas's skin crawl. One of the aliens carried a small silver device in its hand. The mind probe caught the light and seemed to pulse with its own inner glow. Lucas watched as the alien approached each hiding place in the storage area, using the controlled humans to search every corner. "Found them," said a voice that Lucas recognized as Mr. Clark, but it sounded empty and wrong. The alien moved toward their hiding spot. Katie squeezed Lucas's hand so tight it hurt. The creature's large black eyes seemed to look right through the wall at them. It raised the mind probe device and the silver metal began to glow brighter. Lucas felt something strange happening in his head. It was like someone was trying to push their way into his thoughts, but every time they tried, something pushed back. The feeling grew stronger and stronger until it almost hurt. The alien stepped closer and placed the mind probe against the wall where Lucas was hiding. The device flared with brilliant blue light, brighter than Lucas had ever seen it. But instead of the usual gentle hum, it started making harsh crackling sounds. Suddenly the device sparked and went dark. The alien stumbled backward, its glass-like skin flickering with confused colors. It looked at the mind probe in its hand as if it had never seen such a device before. The controlled humans around it stopped moving and stood perfectly still, waiting for orders that didn't come. Lucas felt the pushing sensation in his mind disappear completely. Whatever had just happened, he knew it had something to do with him. The alien tried the device again, pointing it directly at the silo wall, but nothing happened. The mind probe remained dark and lifeless. The Zephyrian made a sound like breaking crystal and quickly moved away, calling other aliens to its location. Lucas and Katie remained hidden as more crystal-skinned creatures arrived to examine the broken device. They spoke in their own language, a sound like wind chimes mixed with static. After what felt like hours, the aliens finally left the storage area. Lucas and Katie waited until they could no longer hear any footsteps before daring to move. When they finally crept out of the silo, they found a world that had been transformed. The colony was quiet except for the mechanical sounds of controlled humans working in the distance. But Lucas was free, and somehow he had broken their most powerful weapon. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stared at the data on her screen for the 100th time, unable to believe what she was seeing. Hidden in her research station deep in the asteroid belt, she had been monitoring surveillance feeds from across the occupied territories. Most of the footage showed the same horrible scenes. Humans with glowing blue eyes working like machines under alien control. But this one feed from Haven's Rest was different. The automated drone had captured something impossible, a Zephyr mind probe device sparking and failing when used near a small human child. Elena ran the footage again, watching the alien stumble backward as its device went dark. In 3 months of studying the invasion, she had never seen anything like it. Elena immediately sent an encrypted message to the remaining human resistance forces. The message was simple but urgent. There was a child on Haven's Rest who could resist the mind probes. If they could reach him, he might be the key to understanding how to fight back. Commander Rick Thompson received the message aboard his stealth ship hidden behind one of Saturn's moons. Rick had lost his own family to the mind probes during the first wave of attacks. Since then, he had dedicated his life to rescuing survivors and fighting the alien occupation. The news about a resistant child gave him something he hadn't felt in months: hope. Rick assembled his best team for the rescue mission. Lieutenant Amy Walsh had been a brain doctor before the war and understood how the mind probes worked. Sergeant Pete Johnson was their best infiltration specialist, able to move through enemy territory without being detected. Both had personal reasons for wanting to strike back at the aliens. The team studied the layout of Haven's Rest colony through satellite imagery. The Zephyrians had set up their control center in the main administrative building, while controlled humans continued their daily work in perfect silence. Getting to the children would mean moving through crowds of people who would report their presence immediately. Rick's ship used stolen Zephyrian stealth technology to approach the planet undetected. They landed in a forest area several miles from the colony and began the dangerous journey on foot. Along the way, they passed groups of controlled humans harvesting crops with mechanical precision. The sight never got easier to watch. Lucas and Katie had spent 2 days hiding in different locations around the colony. They found food and water in abandoned buildings, but every time they tried to move toward the spaceport, they encountered more patrols. Lucas was learning to sense when the aliens were nearby. He felt a strange tingling in his head whenever the Zephyrians came close, as if his brain was warning him of danger. During their second night in hiding, Lucas discovered something else about his abilities. Katie had been crying quietly, overwhelmed by fear and grief for their parents. When Lucas reached out to comfort her, he felt that same pushing sensation he had experienced with the mind probe. At this time, instead of fighting it off, he seemed to be giving something back. Katie's eyes, which had been showing the faint blue glow of partial alien control, suddenly cleared completely. She looked around in confusion, as if waking up from a dream. Lucas, what did you do? I feel different. Like my thoughts are my own again. Lucas didn't understand what had happened, but he knew it was important. Somehow, touching his sister had broken the alien influence over her mind. The ability that protected him from the mind probes could also free others, at least temporarily. Rick's team reached the outskirts of the colony just as the sun was setting. They had been tracking the children's movements using thermal scanners and finally located them in an old maintenance building near the grain processing plant. The area was patrolled by controlled humans, but Pete had found a route through the drainage tunnels that would avoid most of the guards. The rescue team moved carefully through the underground passages. Amy monitored alien communication frequencies, while Pete guided them through the maze of tunnels. They could hear the footsteps of controlled humans walking overhead, their movements perfectly synchronized like a machine army. When they finally reached the maintenance building, Rick used a small scanner to confirm the children were inside. 2 small heat signatures huddled together in what appeared to be a storage room. Rick knocked on the door using a pattern that human resistance fighters had developed. 3 short taps, 2 long ones, then 3 short again. Lucas opened the door carefully and saw 3 adults in military gear. For a moment he was afraid they might be controlled humans pretending to be rescuers. But their eyes were clear and they moved with natural, human gestures instead of the mechanical precision of the controlled. "We're here to help," Rick said quietly. "Dr. Rodriguez sent us. We know about what happened with the mind probe device." Katie looks suspicious. "How do we know you're really human and not under alien control?" Amy stepped forward and smiled, the first genuine human smile Lucas had seen in days. "Because controlled humans don't ask questions like that. They just obey orders." The rescue team quickly explained their plan to get the children off the planet. They would have to move through the colony to reach their hidden ship, avoiding both alien patrols and controlled humans. It was dangerous, but staying on Haven's Rest was certain death. As they prepared to leave, Lucas felt the tingling sensation in his head growing stronger. "The aliens are coming," he whispered urgently. "A lot of them." Rick immediately activated his scanner and confirmed what the boy had somehow sensed. A large group of Zephyrians was moving toward their location, accompanied by dozens of controlled humans. Somehow they had been discovered. The team had only minutes to escape before the building would be surrounded. Pete led them toward an emergency exit while Amy monitored alien communications. The Zephyrians were definitely looking for something specific in this area, which meant they probably knew about Lucas's resistance to their mind probes. As they ran through the backstreets of the colony, Lucas held tightly to Katie's hand. Every few minutes he could feel the alien presence growing closer, and each time he warned the team to change direction. His strange ability to sense the Zephyrians was keeping them one step ahead of capture. They finally reached the forest where Rick's ship was hidden, but as they approached the landing zone, they found it surrounded by controlled humans standing in perfect circles around the vessel. The aliens had found their escape route and set a trap. Rick realized they had only one option left. They would have to fight their way to the ship and hope Lucas's abilities could somehow help them break through the alien control over the guards. It was a desperate plan, but it was their only chance to get the boy who couldn't be broken to safety. The future of humanity might depend on what happened in the next few minutes. The rescue mission had succeeded, but barely. Rick's team managed to break through the controlled humans surrounding their ship when Lucas did something amazing. The 8-year-old boy had grabbed Rick's hand, and suddenly all the nearby controlled humans stopped moving completely. Their blue glowing eyes flickered and went dark for several seconds, giving the team enough time to reach their vessel and escape. Now, Lucas and Katie sat in the medical bay of Rick's ship as they traveled through hyperspace toward a destination the children had never heard of. Amy was running basic medical scans while Pete piloted the vessel through a series of complex jumps designed to hide their trail from any pursuing Zephyrian ships. "Where are we going?" Katie asked, still holding her brother's hand tightly. "Somewhere safe," Rick replied. "A place where the aliens can't find us and where very smart people are working on ways to fight back." Lucas felt tired in a way he had never experienced before. Using his strange ability to disrupt the controlled humans had drained something from inside him. He could barely keep his eyes open as the ship continued its journey through the darkness. Between stars. After 2 days of travel, they finally arrived at their destination. Lucas pressed his face against the small window and gasped at what he saw. A massive space station hung in the corona of a dying star, its metal hull glowing red from the stellar radiation. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small city, with docking bays and living areas spreading out in all directions. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Rick said with pride in his voice. "The last free human stronghold in the galaxy." The station used the intense radiation from the dying star as a natural shield against Zephyrian sensors. Any alien ship that tried to approach would be detected long before it could reach scanning range, and the radiation itself would interfere with their mind probe technology. It was the perfect hiding place for humanity's survivors. As their ship docked, Lucas could see other vessels of various sizes attached to the station. Some were military ships like Rick's, others were civilian transports filled with refugees from the occupied worlds. There were even a few captured Zephyrian vessels that human engineers were trying to understand and reverse engineer. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, but Lucas could see the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Behind him stood Dr. Maria Santos, the station's chief scientist, and Carol Wright, who helped coordinate all the refugee operations. "So this is the boy who broke a mind probe," Admiral Collins said, kneeling down to Lucas's eye level. "We've been very eager to meet you, son." Dr. Rodriguez was there too, the woman who had first spotted Lucas's resistance in the surveillance footage she had traveled from her asteroid research station specifically to study the boy's unique abilities. Her eyes were bright with scientific curiosity, but Lucas could also see genuine concern for his well-being. They gave Lucas and Katie quarters in the civilian section of the station, a small apartment with 2 bedrooms and a common area. It was the first safe place they had slept in since their world was invaded. But Lucas found it hard to rest because he kept sensing something strange about the station itself. The next morning, Dr. Rodriguez began her studies of Lucas in a special medical facility designed for analyzing alien technology. The room was filled with computers and scanning equipment, much of it built from salvaged Safarian devices. She started with simple tests, monitoring Lucas's brain activity while he performed basic tasks. "Your neural patterns are unlike anything I've seen," Dr. Rodriguez explained as she studied the readouts. "Most adult brains follow predictable pathways when processing information, but yours moves in ways that seem almost random, jumping from one area to another without following normal logical sequences." Lucas didn't really understand what she meant, but he tried to answer her questions as best he could. She asked him to describe what he felt when the mind probe had tried to affect him, and how he knew when aliens were nearby. "It's like someone trying to push into my thoughts," Lucas said, "but my thoughts don't want them there, so they push back. And when the aliens are close, I get a tingling feeling in my head that tells me which direction they're coming from." Dr. Rodriguez brought in several captured mind probe devices for controlled testing. When she activated them near Lucas, the same thing happened as on Haven's Rest. The devices would spark and fail, their biomechanical components overloading from some kind of feedback effect. More remarkably, when Lucas concentrated hard, he could extend his protection to others. Dr. Rodriguez had volunteers stand near him while mind probe devices were activated. As long as Lucas was touching them, or focusing on them specifically, the devices couldn't affect them either. "It's as if his mind creates a field of interference," Dr. Rodriguez explained to Admiral Collins during their daily briefing. "The Zephyrian technology relies on being able to map and control neural pathways, but Lucas's brain doesn't follow the patterns they expect, so their mapping fails." The testing continued for several days, with Lucas growing stronger and more confident in his abilities. He learned that he could sense controlled humans from a distance, feel the alien presence in their minds like a cold touch. More importantly, he discovered that with enough concentration, he could sometimes break that control temporarily. Dr. Santos brought news from the front lines that changed everything. Reports were coming in from resistance cells across the occupied territories about other children showing signs of immunity to the mind probes. The youngest seemed to be the most resistant, with children under 10 being almost completely immune. "We think it has to do with neuroplasticity," Dr. Santos explained to the Leadership Council. "Children's brains are still developing, still forming new connections. The Zephyrian probes work by exploiting established neural pathways, but children's pathways are constantly changing." This discovery led to a new mission priority. Rescue teams were sent to every occupied world with orders to locate and extract any children who showed signs of resistance. It was dangerous work, but the potential reward was enormous. If they could gather enough resistant children, they might be able to develop a real defense against the alien mind control technology. Within 2 weeks, other children began arriving at Sanctuary. 12-year-old Noah Bailey was found hiding in the ruins of New Chicago after somehow surviving 3 months alone in alien-controlled territory. 10-year-old Zoe Mitchell had been living in the cave systems of Titan 7, guided by dreams that told her where to avoid the controlled humans. Each child showed different levels of resistance and different secondary abilities. Some could sense aliens from great distances, others could disrupt mechanical systems just by concentrating on them. But Lucas remained the strongest, able to completely disable mind probe devices and temporarily free-controlled humans from alien influence. The children were given their own section of the station where they could live together and learn to understand their abilities. Lucas became their natural leader, helping the newer arrivals cope with their experiences and teaching them how to control their strange powers. But Dr. Rodriguez made a disturbing discovery during her continued research. The children's abilities came with a cost. Each time they used their powers against the alien technology, it drained something vital from them. Their neural activity would spike dangerously high, and they would need longer and longer recovery periods. "Their brains are adapting to fight the alien influence," she explained to Admiral Collins privately. "But the strain is enormous. I'm not sure how much more they can take before there's permanent damage." Admiral Collins faced an impossible choice. The children were humanity's best hope for developing a defense against the Zephyrian mind control technology, but using them as weapons might destroy the very thing that made them special in the first place. As Lucas lay in his bed that night, listening to the other children sleeping nearby, he somehow knew that bigger challenges were coming. He could feel something building in the space around them, a gathering storm of alien minds preparing for something terrible. The war was about to enter a new phase, and the children would be at the center of it. The tingling sensation in his head was getting stronger every day. Word about the resistant children spread through the scattered human resistance like wildfire. Lieutenant Colonel Dan Murphy, who had been leading guerrilla operations on occupied worlds for months, received encrypted messages about the discovery. At Sanctuary, his teams had been fighting a losing battle against the mind-controlled populations, but now there was hope for a real counterattack. Dan's forces had been hiding in the underground tunnel systems of New Chicago when they first encountered 12-year-old Noah Bailey. The boy had been living alone in the ruins for months, somehow avoiding the controlled humans who patrolled the surface. When Dan's soldiers found him, Noah was thin and scared, but his eyes were completely clear of the blue glow that marked alien control. "The metal bugs don't work on me," Noah had explained simply when they asked how he had survived. "When they tried to put them on my head, they just stopped working." Dan immediately contacted Sanctuary and arranged for Noah's extraction, but the boy's rescue had revealed something important. If one resistant child had survived alone in heavily occupied territory, there might be others scattered across the conquered worlds. Captain Lisa Parker was given command of Operation Child Search, a dangerous mission to locate and extract other resistant children from occupied territories. Her teams would have to infiltrate alien-controlled worlds, locate children who might not even know they were special, and get them out alive. The first major rescue took place on Titan 7, a mining world that had been completely under alien control for 2 months. Lisa's team used stolen Zephyrian stealth technology to reach the planet's surface, where they began searching the cave systems that honeycombed the mountainous regions. They found 10-year-old Zoe Mitchell living deep underground, guided by what she called the voices in her dreams. The voices had told her where to hide, what food was safe to eat, and most importantly, how to avoid the controlled humans who searched for survivors. "They talk to me when I sleep," Zoe explained as Lisa's team prepared her for extraction. "They're not alien voices, they're human voices, but from far away. They tell me about other children like me." Dr. Rodriguez was fascinated by Zoe's claims when she arrived at Sanctuary. During brain scans, the girl showed unusual activity in areas associated with long-range communication and pattern recognition. It was possible that the resistant children were somehow connecting to each other across vast distances. Over the next month, more children arrived at Sanctuary. 8-year-old Alex Turner from the farming world of Green Valley, 6-year-old Mia Chen from the industrial planet Forge Prime, and 11-year-old Sam Davis from the research station at Europa. Each child had survived in alien-controlled territory through a combination of natural resistance and strange intuitive abilities. Lucas took on the role of welcoming each new arrival, helping them understand what was happening to them and teaching them that they weren't alone. He had grown more confident in his abilities, but Dr. Rodriguez noticed that he was also becoming more serious, as if the weight of being the strongest among them was aging him beyond his years. The children were housed together in a special section of Sanctuary designed to help them develop their abilities safely. They attended classes where they learned about the alien invasion, human history, and basic scientific principles. But their most important lessons came from each other. Lucas discovered that when the children held hands and concentrated together, their individual resistances became much stronger. A mind probe that might partially affect one child alone would completely fail against 2 children working together. When all 8 children linked their abilities, they could disable alien technology from a distance of several hundred meters. Dr. Rodriguez documented these group effects with growing excitement and concern. The children's combined neural activity was creating interference patterns that the alien technology simply couldn't handle. But the strain on their young minds was enormous, and after each session they would need hours of rest to recover. Forming a neural network, she explained to Admiral Collins during one of their daily briefings. When they link together, their brains start working as a single unit, amplifying each other's natural resistance to alien mind control. The military applications were obvious. If the children could disable alien technology from a distance while working together, they could potentially disrupt entire Zephyrian installations. But using children as weapons violated every principle of human ethics. Even in desperate times, Admiral Collins struggled with the decision for days. The children were volunteers, eager to use their abilities to help free their families and friends from alien control, but they were also just kids who should have been playing games and going to school instead of preparing for war. The decision was made for him when Sanctuary's long-range sensors detected a massive Zephyrian fleet moving toward the Outer Rim territories. Intelligence reports suggested the aliens were planning something called the Final Integration, a process that would permanently merge human consciousness with their collective mind network. "We're out of time," Admiral Collins announced to the senior staff. "If we're going to use the children's abilities, it has to be now, before the aliens complete whatever they're planning." Dr. Rodriguez worked frantically to develop portable equipment that would allow the children to use their abilities during combat operations. She created special helmets that would monitor their brain activity and automatically shut down if the strain became too dangerous. It wasn't perfect protection, but it was better than nothing. Lucas and the other children trained intensively for their new role in the Resistance. They learned how to link their abilities quickly and efficiently, how to focus their interference effects on specific types of alien technology, and how to work together as a team under pressure. The youngest children, 6-year-old Mia and 8, Alex, showed the strongest natural resistance but had the least control over their abilities. The older children, like Noah and 12-year-old Emma Foster, could focus their powers more precisely but were more vulnerable to the mental strain. Lucas remained the strongest and most stable, able to maintain his resistance for longer periods, and help protect the others when their abilities faltered. But Dr. Rodriguez noticed troubling changes in his brain scans. The constant use of his powers was creating new neural pathways that didn't exist in normal human brains. "He's evolving," she told Admiral Collins privately. "All of them are. Their brains are adapting to fight the alien technology, but we don't know what the long-term effects will be." As the children prepared for their first real combat mission, they made a discovery that changed everything. When they linked their abilities while sleeping, they could sense other resistant children across the galaxy. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, hidden in alien-controlled territories and waiting for rescue. "There are more of us out there," Lucas told the assembled leadership, "a lot more. We can feel them in our dreams, just like Zoe said. They're scared and alone, but they're fighting back in their own ways." This revelation opened up new possibilities for the Resistance. If they could locate and extract these other children, they could build a much larger network of Resistance fighters. But it would also mean sending rescue teams into the most heavily defended alien territories. Admiral Collins made the decision to launch multiple simultaneous rescue operations while using the children at Sanctuary to support a major strike against the Zephyrian command structure. It was an enormous risk, but the alternative was watching humanity slowly disappear into the alien collective consciousness. That as Lucas lay in his bed the night before the mission, surrounded by the other sleeping children, he felt their minds touching his in the strange way that had become natural to them. They were no longer just individual children with special abilities. They were becoming something new, something that had never existed before in human history. The tingling sensation in his head had grown so strong that it never completely went away now. He could sense alien minds across vast distances, feel the cold touch of their collective consciousness pressing against human space. The final battle was coming, and everything would depend on whether a small group of children could stand against an entire alien empire. In his dreams that night, Lucas reached out across the galaxy and touched the minds of dozens of other resistant children. Together, they were no longer alone. Together, they might just be strong enough to save humanity. Admiral Collins stood before the assembled strike team in Sanctuary's main briefing room, knowing that what he was about to ask them to do went against everything he believed about protecting children. But humanity was running out of options, and the children themselves had volunteered for the mission. "Operation Mindbreak is our last chance," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "Intelligence reports indicate that the Zephyrians are preparing for something called Final Integration within 72 hours. Every controlled human in the galaxy will be permanently merged with their collective consciousness. After that, there will be no way to free them." Lucas sat with the other children in the front row, his hand holding Katie's tightly. At 8 years old, he had become the unofficial leader of the resistant children, and his decision would influence all the others. The plan they had developed was dangerous beyond anything they had attempted before. Major Steve Clark, a former Special Forces operator who had volunteered to lead the children's protection detail, reviewed the mission parameters. They would infiltrate the Zephyrian mothership using a captured alien shuttle. disable the central control systems using the children's abilities, and escape before the ship's defenses could respond. The mothership is massive, Steve explained, pointing to the holographic display. 3 kilometers long and home to over 1 million Z. Our target is the central consciousness core, where the final integration process will be initiated. If we can disrupt that system, we can prevent the permanent merger and potentially free millions of controlled humans. Captain Morrison, who had lost his original crew to the mine probes months earlier, would pilot the captured shuttle. Commander Jenny Ross, their best pilot, would handle the complex maneuvers needed to dock with the mothership undetected. Lieutenant Amy Walsh would monitor the children's vital signs and ensure their safety during the operation. The children had been training for weeks to work together as a single unit. When they linked their abilities, they could create interference, effects powerful enough to disable entire ship systems, but the strain on their minds was enormous, and Dr. Rodriguez had warned that prolonged use might cause permanent damage. "We understand the risks," Lucas said when Admiral Collins asked if they were sure about volunteering, "but our families are out there under alien control. If we don't try to save them, who will?" The other children nodded in agreement. Noah Bailey, now 12 and one of the strongest after Lucas, had become fiercely protective of the younger ones. Zoe Mitchell, whose dreams had guided her survival, claimed she had seen visions of the mission's success. Even 6-year-old Mia Chen, the youngest and most vulnerable, insisted she wanted to help free her parents. The captured Zephyrian shuttle was a beautiful but alien craft, its biomechanical systems pulsing with their own organic rhythms. But children found it disturbing to be inside technology that felt alive. But they had learned to suppress their discomfort during their training sessions. As the shuttle approached the mothership, Lucas felt the tingling sensation in his head grow, stronger than ever before. The alien presence was overwhelming, like standing next to a waterfall of cold, calculating thoughts. He could sense millions of Zephyrian minds working together in perfect harmony, and underneath them, the faint echoes of controlled human consciousness. "There are so many of them," Zoe whispered, her face pale with strain. "I can hear them all thinking together. It's like one giant mind made up of millions of smaller ones." The mothership was even more massive than the briefings had suggested. Its crystalline hull stretched away in all directions, covered with organically growths that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Docking bays opened and closed like breathing mouths, while smaller ships moved in perfect formation around the vessel. Commander Ross guided their shuttle toward one of the smaller docking bays, using stolen access codes to convince the ships systems they were returning from a patrol mission. The deception worked, and they docked without raising any alarms. Inside the mothership, the assault team found themselves in a world that was part machine and part living organism. The corridors were lined with biomechanical systems that responded to their presence, walls that seemed to watch them pass, and floors that felt warm and slightly soft underfoot. Lucas led the children through the maze-like interior, using his ability to sense the alien presence to navigate toward the central consciousness core. The Zephyrians they encountered paid them no attention, accepting the stolen access codes that identified them as authorized personnel. But as they moved deeper into the ship, Lucas began to realize the true scope of what they were facing. The mothership wasn't just a vessel carrying aliens. It was a living entity, its consciousness formed from the merged minds of millions of beings from dozens of conquered worlds. The children weren't just fighting a ship, they were fighting against the combined mental power of an entire civilization. "Knows we're here," Lucas said suddenly, stopping in the middle of a corridor lined with pulsing organic cables. "The ship itself is alive, and it's starting to recognize that we don't belong." Security systems began activating around them. Biomechanical sensors extended from the walls, scanning the assault team with beams of colored light. Alarm sounds echoed through the corridors. Not mechanical sirens but organic calls that sounded like whale songs mixed with static. Major Clark's team fought their way through waves of Zephyrian defenders, their weapons barely effective against the aliens' crystalline armor. The children stayed in the center of the group, linking their abilities to create a protective field that disrupted the aliens' mind probe weapons. They finally reached the central consciousness core, a massive chamber at the heart of the mothership. The room was filled with towering columns of biomechanical systems, each one pulsing with the stored consciousness of conquered beings. At the center stood the Zephyrian High Collective, a group of ancient aliens who had merged their individual consciousness into the ship's central mind. "Welcome, young humans," the High Collective spoke with a voice that came from everywhere at once. "We have been aware of your resistance for some time, Your minds are ... interesting, chaotic and unpredictable, but with patterns we do not understand. Lucas stepped forward, feeling the combined weight of his friends' minds supporting him. We're here to stop the final integration. You can't just erase human consciousness and pretend it never existed. Consciousness is not erased, the High Collective replied. It is perfected, merged with our own to create something greater than the sum of its parts. Your species will live forever as part of our collective, free from the chaos and suffering of individual existence. The children linked their abilities and began to focus their interference effects on the consciousness storage systems. The biomechanical columns sparked and flickered as their chaotic neural patterns disrupted the carefully ordered alien technology, but the strain was enormous. 6-year-old Mia collapsed first, her small body unable to handle the mental pressure. Then Alex Turner, his nose bleeding as his brain fought against the overwhelming alien presence. One by one, the children began to fall. Lucas felt his friends' minds disconnecting from the network as they lost consciousness. The protective field around the assault team began to weaken, and Zephyrian defenders pressed closer. Major Clark's soldiers were running out of ammunition, and Commander Ross reported that their escape route was being cut off. I can stop this, Lucas said, looking at the massive consciousness storage system, but I'll have to link directly with their network. I might not be able to disconnect afterward. Katie grabbed her brother's arm. No, Lucas, there has to be another way. But Lucas could feel the final integration process beginning. Across the galaxy, millions of controlled humans were being prepared for permanent merger with the alien collective. If he didn't act now, humanity would cease to exist as an independent species. Tell Mom and Dad that I love them, Lucas said, pulling away from his sister, and take care of the other kids. Before anyone could stop him, Lucas placed his hands on the central consciousness storage system and opened his mind to the full power of the alien collective. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, like having lightning strike inside his skull. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being absorbed into the collective, Lucas's chaotic human neural patterns began to spread through the alien network. Like a virus, his creativity, imagination, and stubborn independence were concepts the ordered alien minds couldn't process or contain. The feedback effect cascaded through the entire mothership and beyond, reaching every Zephyrian vessel in the galaxy. The perfectly ordered collective consciousness that had taken millions of years to build began to fracture and collapse under the weight of one small human boy's refusal to surrender his individual identity. Lucas felt his mind expanding beyond anything he had ever imagined, touching the consciousness of every controlled human across the galaxy. For one brief, shining moment, he was connected to all of them, sharing his strength and independence with millions of enslaved minds. Then everything went white, and Lucas Carter disappeared into the space between thoughts, leaving only the echo of a child's laughter spreading through the dying alien network. The explosion of psychic energy that erupted from the Zephyrian mothership could be felt across the entire galaxy. Katie Carter watched in horror as her brother's body collapsed next to the consciousness storage system. His eyes closed and his breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. The biomechanical columns around them were sparking and failing, their organic components writhing as if in pain. Commander Ross reported that similar failures were being detected on Zephyrian ships throughout the fleet. The aliens' perfect coordination was breaking down, their vessels drifting without purpose as their collective consciousness fractured. On occupied worlds across human space, controlled humans were collapsing as the blue glow faded from their eyes. Major Clark's team fought their way back to the shuttle as the mothership began to tear itself apart. The living vessel's consciousness was fragmenting different sections, trying to maintain control while others fell into chaos. Biomechanical systems that had worked in perfect harmony for centuries were now fighting against each other. Katie refused to leave her brother's side, even as the ceiling above them began to crack and leak strange fluids. He's still alive, she insisted when Steve tried to carry Lucas away. I can feel it. His mind is still there, but it's scattered across the network. Dr. Rodriguez, monitoring from Sanctuary, watched the readings from Lucas's protective helmet with amazement and growing dread. His neural activity was off the charts, showing patterns unlike anything in human medical history. His consciousness seemed to be existing in multiple places at once, spread throughout the collapsing alien network. The remaining children, those who were still conscious, joined hands around Lucas's motionless form. Noah Bailey, his face streaked with tears, concentrated harder than he ever had before. Zoe Mitchell used her strange connection to distant minds to search for traces of their friend's consciousness. Even little Mia Chen, barely recovered from her own collapse, reached out with her developing abilities. "I can feel him," Zoe whispered. "He's everywhere and nowhere. His mind is touching every human who was ever controlled, giving them back their freedom, but he's getting lost in all those other thoughts." The feedback effect continued to spread through Zephyrian space. On Haven's Rest, Lucas's parents suddenly stopped their mechanical work and looked around in confusion, the blue glow fading from their eyes. On New Geneva, families that had been separated for months were reunited as the alien control broke. Across 17 star systems, humanity was waking up from its nightmare, but the cost was becoming clear. The Zephyrian High Collective, their consciousness shattered by contact with Lucas's chaotic human mind, were dying. The mothership itself was losing structural integrity as the biomechanical systems that had kept it alive for millennia began to shut down. Admiral Collins made the difficult decision to evacuate the assault team immediately. The mothership was beginning to collapse, and staying any longer would mean certain death for everyone aboard. But Katie refused to abandon her brother, and the other children supported her decision. "He saved everyone," Noah said firmly. "We're not leaving him behind." In the end, they didn't have to. As the children maintained their mental link around Lucas's body, something remarkable happened. The scattered fragments of his consciousness began to pull back together, drawn by the anchor of his friends' minds and the love of his sister. Lucas's eyes opened slowly, but they were different now. They held depths that seemed impossible in an 8-year-old child, as if he had seen the thoughts and memories of millions of beings. When he spoke, his voice carried an echo of vast distances. "I remember all of them," he said quietly. "Every human who was controlled, every alien who was part of the collective. Their thoughts are still with me, but they're free now. We're all free." The evacuation from the mothership was chaotic but successful. As their shuttle pulled away from the dying vessel, they watched it tear itself apart in spectacular fashion. Explosions of bioluminescent energy rippled across its crystalline hull as the consciousness that had held it together finally dispersed into space. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. As Zephyrian ships lost power and coordination, some aliens survived the collapse of their collective consciousness, but they were no longer the unified threat they had once been. Many went mad from the sudden isolation of individual thought, while others simply shut down completely. The rescue missions to extract other resistant children became recovery operations as liberation forces found worlds full of confused but free humans. The children who had survived in hiding were brought to Sanctuary, where they helped the newcomers understand what had happened and cope with their experiences, but the victory came with a terrible price. Of the 8 children who had participated in Operation Mindbreak, only 3 survived: Katie Carter, who had been protected by her brother's sacrifice; Noah Bailey, whose older age had given him more resilience; and Zoe Mitchell, whose natural ability to connect with distant minds had somehow shielded her from the worst effects. Lucas survived, but he was forever changed. The neural pathways in his brain had been permanently altered by his contact with the alien collective. He could still sense minds across vast distances, and sometimes he would speak with the voices of people who had died centuries ago. Dr. Rodriguez worked tirelessly to help him cope with his expanded consciousness, but some changes couldn't be undone. The other children who had collapsed during the mission never fully recovered. Little Mia Chen spent months in a coma before finally waking up with no memory of her special abilities. Alex Turner lost his resistance to alien technology, but gained an uncanny ability to understand any mechanical system just by looking at it. Each child was affected differently by their experience in the years that followed. Humanity rebuilt with a new understanding of the importance of protecting childhood, creativity, and independence. Dr. Rodriguez established schools throughout human space that focused on nurturing mental resilience and individual thought. The surviving resistant children became teachers and guardians, helping to ensure that humanity would never again be vulnerable to mental domination. The Zephyrian Empire effectively ceased to exist as a unified force. Small groups of survivors scattered across the galaxy, some trying to rebuild their collective consciousness, while others learned to exist as individuals for the first time in their species' history. A few even sought out human contact, curious about the chaotic thought patterns that had destroyed their perfect order. Lucas grew up to become something unique in human history, a bridge between individual and collective consciousness. He could speak with the voices of the past and sometimes glimpse possible futures. He dedicated his life to helping other children develop their mental defenses while ensuring they never had to. sacrificed their childhood as he had. 10 years after the liberation, Captain Katie Carter stood on the observation deck of the memorial station that had been built in the system where the final battle had taken place. The station orbited the remains of the Zephyrian mothership, now a cloud of crystalline debris that caught and reflected starlight in beautiful patterns. She touched her brother's name on the memorial wall carved alongside those of Alex Turner, Mia Chen, and the other children who had given their childhood to save humanity. "No one could break your mind, Lucas," she whispered, "and because of that, no one ever will break ours." Behind her, dozens of ships were preparing to launch from the station's docking bays. They carried human explorers, scientists, and diplomats to the far reaches of the galaxy, spreading the message that consciousness was not something to be conquered or controlled, but celebrated in all its chaotic, creative, independent glory. Lucas had taught them that the greatest strength of humanity was not its technology or its weapons, but the simple refusal of a single mind to surrender its individuality. That lesson would guide them as they ventured forth to meet whatever other challenges awaited among the stars. The memorial station's lights reflected off the crystal debris field as the ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying humanity's message of freedom to the galaxy. In a universe full of collective consciousnesses and hive minds, humans would always stand apart as the species that chose chaos over order, creativity over perfection, and individual thought over group conformity. And somewhere in the quantum foam between thoughts, Lucas Carter smiled and moved on to whatever adventure awaited beyond the boundaries of normal consciousness. His work finally complete,